So just how reliable are cadaver dogs? Joining us live is cadaver dog handler Andy Redman. Welcome, Andy, and let me first focus on the reliability. Let's assume, and this is just my assumption, it's a well-trained dog. What's the percentage of accuracy when you test these dogs?
With a well-trained dog, it's very high. It's in the 90 percentile range.
In terms of the, we just heard from Cindy, the grandmother, and she was talking, she gave us a tour of the backyard. She said that George, her husband, sweats a lot. Is that the type of thing that might throw a dog off? Could a dog identify, for instance, perspiration as being representative of decomposition when in fact it's perspiration?
I wouldn't think that it would identify perspiration as the scent of decomposition. There's got to be something else there that replicates that.
Is there such a thing as a false positive? Is there anything that could be there that would mislead a dog into thinking that something that a human had decomposed when it's something else?
Well, if for example somebody bled in the area, bled onto the concrete blocks, even some time ago, if it seeped down in between, the odor would still be there. Dogs are trained to detect a wide spectrum of scent, so if there was residual scent there, the dog would indicate on it.
I suppose it might matter, maybe not, as how much blood was there. A speck of blood if someone simply cuts himself or herself and it's a minor injury, as opposed to, you know, a more substantial amount of blood?
Well, it all depends how the dog has been trained. A lot of dogs are trained down to a fairly low threshold. When we train dogs, we train them for a wide spectrum of odor. So they're basically trained for some small amounts and then some massive amounts of odor.
Are you at all familiar with the training of the people who are doing handling the dogs in the search of this backyard?
I've had a couple of them in workshops that I've done in the Florida area.
How do you teach a dog to do this?
Well, it's a mechanical type operation initially, and you introduce the dog to target odors, and in the case of cadaver scent, we use target odors that replicate from shortly after biological death to the odor that remains in the ground after a body becomes skeletal. The dog is trained to byproducts of human decomposition, so that even with skeletal remains, if the dog can many times locate where the body decomposed.
All right, what about some variables? Suppose that there had been a body decomposing there 5 years ago. Would a dog likely hit on that?
Well, they very well might, because we can document actual cases where homicide victims that have been buried have been located in the 20-year range, and there's a number of handlers around the country that are doing what they call historical search, where they're looking for historical graves that are in the 100-plus year range.
All right, let's assume now that there is a person who has just died, who is put in the ground there, or put there for about 2 days, and then removed, and then 6 weeks later dogs go in. Would you expect that a dog would be able to determine whether or not someone had been decomposing there?
Well, it depends on the environmental conditions, what kind of weather conditions had occurred in between the time of death and the time that the dogs were worked in the area. Depends how the body was treated. Was it wrapped in plastic? Was it just left in the area unwrapped? And was there did it rain? Is it in full sun where it'll burn off? There's too many environmental conditions to be able to speculate.
Andy, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Coming up, why is jailed mother Casey Anthony's lawyer is now making demands? You remember that the cadaver dog sniffed for clues all around Kaylee's grandparents' house. Well, now Casey's lawyer is demanding videotapes of the dog sniffing and more. The question is, what does he want and why? Let's bring back the panel. Gloria, I have a copy of the motions called Demand for Discovery and Inspection Relating to Canines and Their Handlers. She has now been charged with murder. She's charged with lying and also of neglect. But he's making this demand. Why now?
Well, obviously, Greta, because he thinks that something else is coming down the pike. So he wants to know everything and anything about these cadaver dogs. We've all heard about putting the police on trial. Well, this is putting the police dog on trial, or dogs, the cadaver dogs. He's going to want to know everything. The certification, the performance, the training. Were they off-leash? Were they on-leash? What about the handlers? What is the record of false positive, false negatives, accurate positive, accurate negatives? He's going to know everything about these cadaver dogs in case they finally do alert to something positive in reference to Caylee.
You know, it was interesting, though, that our expert just told us there's a couple of things at least I found interesting. One is that how if a body had been there for a while or something, that rain could make it a more difficult task for the dogs, or it could burn off. But on the flip side, Ted, he said old blood. So if someone bled, you know, a child bumping his head or something, it could be old blood.
It certainly could, and you have to applaud the lawyer, whether you like or dislike what's going on in this case. The lawyer is clearly doing his job, and these dogs, as Gloria just represented, the handler of these dogs can cue the dog, and there can be a false alert. What happens is once these dogs hit, they're kind of rewarded for the hit, but the handler in handling these dogs are not always properly trained, nor are the dog properly trained. And if you remember this guy, he said something about if there was well-trained dogs. So that becomes important. The lawyer is actually doing his job in this case.
Michael, I assume that the lawyer is doing this now in part to put pressure on the prosecution, hoping the prosecution sort of drop the ball, keep the prosecutor busy, and basically to stick a stick in the spokes of the wheel, right?
Yeah, probably. I've got a feeling that they've got more than one prosecutor on this case. It's going to be interesting because the prosecutor will fight this discovery motion. He's not going to want to give it up. He's going to argue that it has nothing to do with a child neglect case. Absolutely nothing to do with it. Gloria's right. What he's doing, let him, and he's doing his job, get all the information he can, because we can almost all, I think, guarantee that this murder charge is coming down the pike, and he may as well get it early. But one thing I do know, that juries aren't big on these type of dogs. I mean, that can't be the only evidence in a case.
Well,
they'll push that evidence to the rear, believe me.
All right, well, and we've noted before that, I mean, at least I think it's going to be highly significant when the forensic evidence comes back from the trunk, whichever direction that goes. But looking at this motion, and I've got it in my hand, I don't know if you can shoot this over my shoulder so the viewers can see it, is that you've got this laundry list. First you have videotape of other audio-visual recording of canine searches, and then for each canine, for each dog, and look at this list, A through, you know, C, all these things that the lawyer wants just about the dogs. So it's to answer this is going to be pretty laborious, isn't it, Gloria?
Yes, it is. But I'm sure that law enforcement has this kind of information on all of the dogs, because I would think that this would be a fairly routine request, at least if there is a murder charge or an attempted murder charge.
But listen to this, Ted. For each training course, identify handler, location, instructors, method of grading, and total number of hours of training. Include a copy of the training manual if applicable. If no manual exists, so indicate. That's just one. That's just B.
That's just one. And what this guy is doing is he's going to have his expert to be able to look all this over, and he hopes that his expert will be able to refute this. So he has a right to, by the way, at some stage to get this according to what's coming down the pipe.
Gloria, everyone wants to hear from the jailed mother. Is there anything that law enforcement can do? You know, what carrot can they dangle in front of her so that she talks, because she has all the information?
Well, that's what everybody believes, but apparently, I mean, there's no way to compel anyone to say anything, especially if they are charged. I mean, we have the Fifth Amendment right that can be invoked by any suspect or defendant, and not to incriminate themselves. So no one can compel her, but she may crack just simply because of the pressure. Or her attorney may decide to push to a speedy trial on the current charges, because apparently there's a quirk under Florida law that she couldn't be then charged with something more serious later.
You know, I don't believe that. I think that's a mistake. I cannot believe that that's.
So
I think the person report that's just dead wrong.
And if
but
they
you know what I would, but you know what I would do is, if I were the prosecutor, get the forensic tests back. If they are damning, I'd go to her, her lawyer, and say, look, you know, now's the time to talk, because things aren't going to get any prettier for your client. But that depends on the forensic test. Panel, thank you. Here's a look at what's coming up after this show on the O'Reilly Factor.